This last section, we're going to be looking at two concepts. We're going to finish up on the concepts of those four ways that Indian people are identified by looking at self-identified Indians. And then we're going to spend some time talking about a concept called post-Indian, and we'll spend a few minutes on that. But first I want to go back and take a look at just a quick recount. We've talked about legally defined Indians, meaning those people who are defined by law through treaty, through other laws, whether state, federal, or tribal. We talked about the biological way of defining an Indian through phenotype, how people look and what their blood quantum is. We also raised the question of why are there policy to reduce Indian people's ability to be Indian with diminishing blood quantums, yet the African Americans will always be African Americans regardless of their blood quantum, as long as there's one drop of African American blood in their system. And we also talked about the issues related to cultural definitions of Indians, and particularly raising the question of who establishes what those cultural markers are, who determines what we look at to define Indians through some kind of a cultural process. But the last one is the self-identified Indians. And these are people who identify as American Indians but are not recognized as a member of their tribe, the tribe they claim, for a variety of reasons. We'll talk a little bit about that. Or they claim membership in an organization that they may consider to themselves to be a tribe, but it's not recognized by federal or state governments as a tribe. And this is pretty important because this gets to the real essence of the legal side of tribal membership, and that is that the federal government recognizes through court case, Supreme Court case Morton versus Mancari, where they recognize that benefits that go to American Indians because of their tribal membership is not based in race, but is based in political status. That is, that because the tribe has a political relationship with the federal or state government, all the members of that tribe are entitled to whatever it is that that political relationship establishes. And that's different from being race-based, where a person has access to something or is denied something because of their race. This is based in political status. And when we look at these three definitions, the cultural and the biological and the legal, we find that those are related to very closely to this idea of political relationship between the federal and state governments and that particular tribe. But when people don't have a relationship with a tribe, then their definition is basically their own. Now, there's a number of reasons why people don't have a relationship with a tribe that's recognized by federal or state governments as being an Indian tribe. You know, I've already mentioned some things about people who's had ancestors back in the 1880s, 1890s, early 1900s who refused to put their name on the roll because they mistrusted the government. And that's a very much of a valid argument. I mean, it really is true. But the problem is that once that person's not on the roll, then it creates real problems for those people 3, 4, maybe even 5 generations out, where they can point back to that ancestor, but because that particular ancestor did not take those steps, they may be precluded from ever becoming recognized as a member of the tribe. So this is kind of an unfortunate situation. But at the same time, it exists. And the other thing that I wanted to mention at this point before I go much further is that there's this process where tribes can approach the federal government to become declared and recognized as an Indian tribe. And there's been times when tribes have gone in and gotten their recognition, and then there's times that there's been a moratorium that the federal government's not going to accept any more applications for recognition. Some tribes have recognition with their state, And the reason I want to talk about that is this second line here I have here says some have created their own tribes, like the Deer Clan people or the Rainbow Tribe. I was listening to Native American Calling here a few weeks ago, and a person who was being interviewed by the host was talking about in the state of Missouri that there's people who have formed nonprofit corporations calling themselves such and such a tribe, and then they sell tribal memberships. And this is a creation of your own tribe. These are people who go out and get that legal status, and by creating a nonprofit. And so this issue of how the state recognizes tribes is really a challenge, because on one hand, you have people creating their own tribes and creating these nonprofits, and then you have legitimate tribal groups that exist within state boundaries, but for whatever reason they don't have federal recognition. And this is in Virginia and in Pennsylvania, and a lot of people up in the Northeast area, some people in the Midwest. And the state legislatures often have actually passed legislation recognizing these people as tribes. And then there's these other guys who form their tribes and they get a corporation, nonprofit corporate status. So those are two different statuses. But the ones who create their own tribes, of course, are using the nonprofit status. And the other thing that's kind of funny, and I think this is I think it's funny, but it's also very, very true, is there's some people self-identify themselves as Indians because they believe that they were an Indian in the previous lifetime, the reincarnation phenomena. And this came to me through one of my students in one of the earlier classes when I taught this class. The guy came up to me and said, I meet a lot of people who claim to be Indian, but they were Indian in their previous lifetime. And so, wow, that's pretty interesting. And so people really want, people want to self-identify themselves as Indian, and this is really an interesting phenomena. We wonder why, because those of us who have lived in Indian communities and know in these tribal communities know that being a member of the tribe isn't just saying, hey, I'm a member of the tribe. It also includes obligations. You have obligations to your family, you have obligations to your clan, you have obligations to the community as a whole. You may be able to get some kind of economic benefit, but at the same time you're paying a lot for it in a number of other ways. And so you kind of wonder what these people have really no strong understanding of what it means to live in a have an integral part of a tribal community. But they want something like that, and it kind of goes back to that Maslow's thing of wanting to belong to something. And so we have these kinds of folks out there. There's a lot of them, and that's just part of life in the 21st century. Now, this last concept I want to talk about is called post-Indian. And we start off looking at post-Indian from this perspective. Excuse me. When we reflect on the previous definitions of Indian as developed by Eva Marie Gueret, we find that there's three things that are very, very basic to all of those definitions. One, they're based in outsider perspectives, meaning it's not the tribe that's self-defining, it's somebody saying this is who Indians are, whether it's the federal government saying, we're going to pass this law that 1/4 more degree Indian blood is an Indian, or whether it's popular culture saying this is what Indians look like, and you got to have long hair, or you got to have high cheekbones, or you got to have straight black hair, or whatever, or you have to have a certain amount of blood quantum in order to be Indian. Those are often, that blood quantum thing, even though it's phenotypical, it also came out of the law. That's why they're so closely integrated. But that comes from outside the tribe, this popular idea of what Indians are from the popular culture. And then the cultural idea of what an Indian is, if the tribe's not defining that, it's going to be defined by somebody on the outside. It's going to be defined by the United States Supreme Court. It's going to be defined by state legislature. It's going to be defined by some trader in some little tourist town that only wants to buy certain artwork because they think it's Indian, because anything else isn't culturally Indian. So that's first thing is all of these definitions, these first three in particular, the ones I'm looking at, are based in outsider perspectives and outsider criteria. Second, all of the definitions are based to meet the needs of people other than the tribe itself. When you have the laws being passed, although the tribes may be beneficiaries of the laws, don't think the federal government, either through the courts or through the Congress or state governments and their courts and their state legislatures or their governor's office or BIA or any of these administrative offices, are doing things just for the benefit of the tribe. They've also got, as they say, they got a horse in the race. There's something there that they're meeting their needs as well. And the definitions that are provided as to what an Indian is by these outsider groups often meet the needs of the outsider groups more than it meets the needs of the tribe. And that's the other commonality. The last commonality all implicitly support the idea that Indians are vanishing, that we're going away, and once we're gone, then the land, the resources, all of that will be opened up for everybody else. And so we look at the law itself. You got a 1/4 degree Indian blood, and if you're an exogamous community, then all of a sudden you don't have the basis for a blood quantum based membership. Although we're finding more and more tribes who are stepping away from the blood quantum as being the basis for defining tribal membership. Sault Ste. Marie tribe in Michigan, White Earth Chippewa has just recently revised their constitution. I don't know if it's been enacted yet, but they took away their blood quantum. A lot of them just simply say if you've got an ancestor who signed a treaty, or if you have an ancestor that was documented as part of the community at a certain point in time, then you're automatically a member of the tribe. That eliminates the blood quantum, and it also eliminates the ability of blood quantum to cut out and gradually eliminate the tribe. The biological thing is tribes, as Indian people are exogamous, those tribal, um, phenotypical type things become diluted. And so maybe you start having a whole lot of blue-eyed, red-haired Indians. That's fine. The tribe that may be fine with the tribe, but on the outside they look at, oh, that guy's not an Indian. He's and so that phenotypical definition, the biological definition, begins to go to create a situation where Indians gradually vanish. And the same thing with the culture. I mean, we see some tremendous cultural change in our tribal communities in the last 25, 30 years. And quite honestly, though, the challenges and changes that we've seen in the culture in our tribal communities in the last 25 or 30 years are probably no greater than the 25 or 30 years before that, or no greater than the 25 or 30 years between 1880 and 1905, and probably no greater than the cultural changes and for some tribes 25 years in the 1500s. So we're always dealing with this idea that somehow our culture has to be pure Western influence, European influence, and anything less than that is less than Indian. So all of these things represent a vanishing Indian. They also meet other people's needs, and they're all based on outsider perspective. So we have to really think about this. Is this how we want to define ourselves? So Garot, in her book, finally concludes her book by saying, and basically she says all of these definitions suck. The only definition that really makes any sense is if people have kinship with the tribe. Having family or quote kin within the tribe should be the basis for being identified as Indian or a member of the tribe. And that's how she concludes her book after analyzing these 4 ways that people are defined as Indians. But Anishinaabe writer Gerald Visner has been writing for quite a number of years, and quite some time back coined this term post-Indian. And the basis for him and the reason for him creating this word post-Indian, because of course post means after, but what's after Indian? Well, for some people's mind, after Indian is nothing. They're vanished. But his perspective is that post-Indian is when Indian people identify themselves. That is, that they create their own identity based on their tribal values, the needs of the community, and their own history. their own cultural practices. All of this goes into who an Indian community is, a tribal community, and the members and the people who participate as members in that community. And so when we look at post-Indian, it's when Native people are identified not by this pan-Indian outsider terms such as American Indian or Native American, but through our own tribal processes that recognize our kinship, the place that we came from, and the place that we live as tribal people, and our responsibility to ourselves and to our community and to the land that we came from. And this is very, very different concept than what we have when we look at what is an Indian, what is an American Indian, what is a Native American. This idea of post-Indian is really, when somebody says, well, what's your racial background? I would say Anishinaabe, because that's that's who I am. Not only that's who I am in terms of our tribal language. I mean, I could say it in English, which is Chippewa, or French, which is Ojibwe, but I say Anishinaabe. That doesn't, that identifies who I am, not just in terms of being indigenous to North America, but also identifies who my relatives are, where the place that my ancestors have come from, and how I involve myself in the responsibility of carrying that tribal membership. So we're seeing a lot of changes in how identity is approached. There's still a lot of struggle and a lot of controversy in some communities because they're divvying up this casino money and per capita payments. They want to cut people out so the per capita payments will go to fewer people and therefore be larger. There's other people who want to add people into their tribal roles in order to have more money to apply for um, more federal support. Um, so we see this is not without controversy. There are people who are very sensitive about not being recognized as Indian, so they kind of create situations where they're challenging other people's Indianness because they're insecure about their own status. So this whole issue of identity is a very powerful issue in our tribal communities. It has a lot of baggage. And it's something that's not going to go away very quickly, but it's something that we all need to reflect upon and try to make sense out of. So this concludes the online lecture 5-part series on identity. And check back with your syllabus and the module overview in order to see what kinds of additional readings, assignments, discussions are required. Thank you.